barley, okay? And then they dry it, okay? There's three things that really characterize the single malt and make it what it is, right? The first is the water in it, where the water's from and what the water tastes like. What it runs through, what it runs over, is it salty, is it chalky, is it flinty? The second thing is what they dry that malted barley with, okay? Do they use wood? Do they use peat? Do they use coal? Okay, and we'll talk about, you know, the characteristics of each one of these as we sort of move through the evening. The third thing is what they store it in, what they store the whiskey in after they make it, all right, and where. Is it stored on an island? Is it stored in the Highland? Okay, when your whiskey is in a barrel, also, is it a wood barrel? Is it a sherry barrel? Is it a bourbon barrel?
Wood barrel.
Okay.
Yeah, Conrad.
So at any rate, so it's what they store it in, okay? Now that could be a big barrel, it could be a quarter cask. If you store less whiskey in a smaller barrel, it's going to take on more of the properties of that particular wood or barrel, okay? So like in Highland malts, they're stored in sherry casks or sherry casks and then a bourbon cask. So if it's stored in a sherry cask, it's going to take on the properties of the sherry, and that's what makes a Highland malt have that sort of sweet wine taste, as opposed to if it's put in a bourbon cask. Bourbon made in Kentucky and Tennessee, they can only use those once, those barrels, and then they break them down and they ship them over to Scotland, and that's what they use to source some of the whiskeys in. Same in Portugal and Spain with the Jimenez or Oloroso sherry cask. They use them once and then they break them down and they ship them over to the distilleries. So those are the three characteristics: the water, what they dry the malted barley with, and then what they store it in and where. When you store whiskey in a barrel, you're going to lose like 30 to 40% over the life of the aging process, okay? Which is one of the things that makes it expensive. The other thing is, 90% of the whiskey, single malt whiskey that's made, goes into blended scotches. So only 10% of it remains as a single malt. One of the things we have a couple examples of tonight is there's not only distilleries, but there's independent bottling companies, okay? And that's, if you're really, really interested in whiskey, that's where you find some really exciting things. Because what independent bottling companies do is they go to Macallan or Highland Park or Kalila or Ardbeg, they go to those distilleries and they say, all right, we'll take these 6 casks right here. They take them to their facility, they take the whiskey right out of the cask and they put it right in a bottle. They don't mix it with water, they don't filter it, they don't chill filter it, they don't put any caramel or colorings in it. If you take, for example, a Lefroy or a Balvenie, okay, not to a fault, but these companies, the distilleries, what they're interested in, they want you to buy a 10-year-old Lefroy that you enjoy, all right, and they want it to be consistent. And they want you to be able to taste a 10-year and have, when the next time you get a bottle and taste that, you want it to be the same. That's what they're interested in. The independent bottling companies recognize that there's a market for people that are interested in the really interesting characteristics of the true whiskey in its purest state. So we're going to taste a couple of those this evening. The last thing that I want to say is just run through a couple of tasting techniques, which is, first of all, when you smell a whiskey, okay? When we put some whiskey in the glass, when you smell it, it's not like a wine. You always want to smell whiskey with your mouth open, all right? You've got 6 taste receptors in your nose and like 10, or 6 in your mouth and like 10,000 in your nose. If you smell whiskey with your mouth closed, you're going to fry your nose and you're not going to be able to smell anything for a while. Okay, so you always smell whiskey with your mouth open. You feel a little foolish. You feel kind of like, but that's the way you smell whiskey. The other thing is, you want to swirl it around in your glass. You want to, we have some spring water here. You want to put a little splash in there. Ultimately, ideally what you want to do, it's kind of, you sort of grow up with like an Uncle Bob or something like that telling you, oh, drink it like a man, I drink it neat. Well, that may be the case, but when you're tasting whiskey, okay, you want to put an eat, you want to taste, smell it, with your mouth open, you want to take a little sip of it neat, and then you want to put a little water in. Ideally, you want to put an equal amount of water as you put whiskey. That's the water unlocks the various layers. So when you're, when we say, oh, like our first whiskey tonight, when we say, my notes say the nose is light and sweet with barley malt, green grass, and wood smoke. Okay? You don't put any of those things in there. It's just like wine. It's the terroir. The aging process works both ways. It both evaporates from the barrels and takes on the characteristics of the terroir where they've made and stored that whiskey. Okay? But putting a little bit of water really unlocks that. So I encourage you to do that. The second technique is a very old one called chewing, where you take a little bit of that whiskey in your mouth in its purest form, okay, before you put water in, and you chew. About 10 or 15 seconds for every year that it was stored, that it was aged, okay? And the saliva works with that, and you start unlocking those various layers, okay?
Got it.
Work,
That's a good start.
I wish I could work like that every day.
Oh, yeah.
So,
I gotta watch you, honey. I gotta
so the first whiskey that we have tonight is a Glen Kinchy, okay? This is a lowland whiskey, all right? First thing you want to remember about lowland whiskeys, you might hear about Campbelltown. That's lowland also. There's a couple of regions of Scotland, like Campbelltown, which is essentially the lowland, but people from Campbelltown, they got to be different, so they're different. But it's essentially, they're very similar. The main thing that will characterize a lowland whiskey is that it's unpeated, okay? So that means they used perhaps coal in the process of drying the malted barley, okay? But it's very, very triple, distilled, and it's going to have, this is almost going to be like a cognac or a brandy. It's going to be very fine. It's not going to have the, like some of the Islas and some of the others, the very heavy, smoky, blue peat smoke, nose up the chimney kind of flavor. So the notes that I made for this are for the nose, as I said, light and sweet with barley malt, green grass, and wood smoke. Okay, that's going to be the smell that you get. The taste is slightly sweet, taste of apples and cinnamon with a touch of honey and spice. So if you want to start lining up those glasses, here we go.
Excellent job.
Chris, is the peat a smoke